And that's not an opinion, that's a fact.
Oh, there was an education delivered this morning to professors at Woke U who also choose to identify as the Yentas on The View. They didn't know how to react to it. They didn't know what to do. Their training to become professors at Woke U, it doesn't train them to combat the truth. The only way they are trained to combat the truth is to yell, scream, or reach into their purse for their closest accusation. For example, if the truth is being delivered by a man, you try to discredit him by accusing him of mythical misogyny or being infected with toxic masculinity. If the truth is being delivered by a woman, you accuse her of mythical racism. Well, KC, what if the truth is being delivered by someone who is gender non-binary? Well, in that case, you're screwed. These tactics are useless because you can't use them against someone who belongs to a marginalized group. Those of you who have been following the channel for a while, you guys know that I have no problem admitting when I'm wrong. Now, it's not something that I like to do. I mean, no one likes to admit when they're wrong about something, but I don't mind doing it. Last summer, when Shannon Sharpe filed for divorce from Skip Bayless, hey, it's me, Shay Shay. When the grown man who calls himself Shay decided to end his marriage with Skippy Bay, I said that ratings for Undisputed would not be affected by it. I said Skip Bayless was the star of the show. Ratings for this polished turd were already in the pooper. With Shay Shay leaving, I didn't think it would really have that much of an impact. Here we are almost a year later, and I could not have been more wrong. I have been impressed with Shannon Sharpe since he got out of his toxic relationship with Skip Bayless. This dude is quickly becoming the biggest star in sports media. Well, Casey, what about Pat McAfee? What about Pat McAfee? Patty is a YouTube star, but he's not a TV star. Shannon Sharpe is both. You can make a strong case that Shannon Sharpe is a bigger star than Stephen A. Smith. Go look at the ratings for First Take. Look at the ratings on Monday and Tuesday when both Shay and A are on the show, and look at the ratings for the rest of the week. The impact that Shannon Sharpe has made is undeniable. So, I was wrong about Shay Shay. I had no problem admitting it. But there is a group in this country who seems to have a real problem admitting when they're wrong. They call themselves members of the mainstream media, and the biggest offenders, they call themselves the Yentas on The View. Many people believe that the COVID lockdowns had a detrimental impact on children. Even if you supported lockdowns at the time, which I didn't. I never understood the logic behind locking the entire country down. When the idea was first pitched to the general public, the lockdowns were only supposed to last for a couple of weeks. You guys remember that? I believe the media called it stopping the curve. Now, of course, people like Dylan Mulvaney and Rachel Levine, they didn't follow this advice. They came out of the lockdowns with additional curves. But the 2 weeks turned into 2 months, and for some states, 2 weeks turned into 2 years. Down here in the South, life pretty much returned to normal after a few weeks. Now, sure, we had to wear those doofus masks. Sometimes when I'm out in public today, I see someone and I wish that masks were still mandated. But for the most part, life returned to normal down here in the South relatively quickly. For other parts of the country, that unfortunately was not the case. Kids were out of school for months or even longer. Many people believe that the lockdowns were more damaging to children than the COVID. This morning, Dr. Phil, he was a guest on The View. Now, I don't know why someone like Dr. Phil would voluntarily agree to be in the presence of the Yentas. If you gave me the option to experience a Russian vacation with Vlad Putin or sitting next to the whoopee cushion as she hikes her leg and releases a brisk summer wind, I'm choosing the pooter, and I mean Vlad Putin, not the actual pooter. I guess Dr. Phil is a glutton for punishment because he chose to subject himself to toxic flatulence. Fun fact, though, for some of my younger viewers, did you guys know that Dr. Phil has something in common with Gayle King? Both of their television careers were started by Oprah Winfrey. When Oprah had her talk show, she would bring on Dr. Phil as a guest when they were discussing psychological issues. When Oprah needed her dry cleaning, she relied on Gayle King. This morning on The View, though, the topic of discussion was centered around the COVID. Why? Why are they still talking about this? Last I checked, the year was 2024. I have barely heard anything about the COVID in the last 18 months, maybe even 2 years. The last time I saw anything COVID related was last summer when Travis Kelce decided to become Travis Pfizer. And that name change was temporary because a couple of months later, he started dating Taylor Swift, donated his Franken beans to become a full-fledged Swiffer. Hey, Tay-Tay. Hey, Tay-Tay. I love you. The Yentas, they wanted to get Dr. Phil's opinion on the COVID lockdown. Specifically, they were talking about the impact that lockdowns had on children. I would imagine that the beauties on The View thought Dr. Phil was going to take their side. I mean, it is rare for someone to be invited on this echo chamber who has a different opinion than the Radiant Sun host and the great pretender Alyssa the Farrah Griffin. Dr. Phil, though, he put on an absolute clinic this morning. He was exposing the lonely women in this audience to something that they have never been exposed to before. The truth. At one point, Professor Cushion tried to prevent the spread of the truth by releasing powerful propaganda flatulence. Unfortunately, though, for the whoopee cushion, Dr. Phil must have lost his sense of smell because the whoopee wind had no impact on the TV doctor. Watch for yourself.
And the same agencies that knew that are the agencies that shut down the schools for 2 years. Who does that? Who takes away the support system for these children? Who takes them away and shuts it down? And by the way, when they shut it down, they stopped the mandated reporters from being able to see children that were being abused and sexually molested, and in fact sent them home and abandoned them to their abusers.
There was also a pandemic going on, and they were trying to save
kids' lives. Remember, we know a lot of folks who died during this. So it wasn't, people weren't laying around eating bond, but, well, you know what? We're lucky. Maybe we're lucky they didn't, because we kept them out of the places that they could be sick, because no one wanted to believe we had an issue.
Are you saying no school children died of COVID?
I'm saying it was the safest group. They were the less vulnerable group and will suffer more from the mismanagement of COVID than they will from the exposure to COVID. And that's not an opinion, that's a fact.
First of all, did you notice that Whoopi Goldberg tried to use the classic woke tactic of pretending that this was all about the safety of the children? The children, oh, it's all about the children. We must keep them safe. We must protect our future. That one lady tried to reinforce the point while also trying to make Dr. Phil look like a complete dumbass. I can't ever remember her name. It wasn't the anonymous blonde. It was the other anonymous Yenta, maybe Andy Navarre. Who cares? It doesn't matter what her name is. She said to Dr. Phil, "Are you saying that no children died from the COVID?" I've listened to that clip several times. At no point did Dr. Phil say anything remotely close to that. I was not sitting there in the fart factory. I'm watching this from home. Andy Navarre is sitting right beside Dr. Phil, and she still asked him that ridiculous question, knowing he didn't say that. But that's okay. That's okay. Dr. Phil, he must have studied the habits of the Yentas before making his appearance on The View, because he was ready for their propaganda. Dr. Phil claimed that children suffered more from the mismanagement of the COVID more than they suffered from the COVID itself. And that's not my opinion, ladies, that's a fact. This is what happens when you allow yourself to be blinded by ideology. This should have never been a political issue. I don't know the politics of Dr. Phil. I would assume that he is a common sense thinker and not another shitfuck. What I do know, every one of the ladies on The View, they blindly support the Democrats no matter what. Well, Casey, that's simply not true. Alyssa the Farrah Griffin is a Republican. She endorsed Nikki Haley for president. Yeah, that's my point. Dr. Phil, he presented the ladies on The View with facts, and they responded with rhetoric. They could not disprove his points. It doesn't take a PhD in psychology to figure out that kids need to be in school. That's where kids belong. Kids need to be involved in sports. They need to be involved in extracurricular activities. The last thing that kids need is idle time. Again, this should not be a political issue, but everything on The View has to be politicized. Have you ever been around someone that was homeschooled? I'm sure it's more common today than it was when I was growing up, since, a lot of these schools have turned into indoctrination centers. When I was growing up, though, there were very, very few kids that were homeschooled. There was a noticeable difference in the kids that were. Educationally, the homeschooled kids were fine. Matter of fact, they were probably better educated than those of us in public or private school. But socially, there was a huge difference. Not with all of them, of course, but definitely with some of them. While we spent 8 hours every day surrounded by kids our own age, they were spending 8 hours with their parents or another adult. Kids are supposed to learn how to read and write in school. They're supposed to learn how to add and subtract. But in my opinion, the most important thing that kids learn in school is how to deal with other people. They learn how to deal with life. A couple of weeks ago, my stepdaughter came home from school after having a bad day. It was your typical high school girl problem. Someone said something about someone else. High school girl gossip. Shit that's really no big deal, but to her that day, it was a very big deal. When she got home, she said, "I can't wait to get out of high school so I never had to deal with this again." I said, the same social problems that you deal with in high school, you will be dealing with that the rest of your life. High school is the place where you learn how to deal with it. You learn what type of people you want to surround yourself with and the type of people that you want to avoid. Now, that's just a very small example, but for 2 years, high school kids, they were robbed of that development. They were robbed of that opportunity. That is 2 years of lost development that they will never get back. Instead of the beauties on The View admitting that they were wrong, instead of Whoopi Goldberg saying, lockdown seemed like the right move at the time, but looking back at it now in hindsight, I can see how lockdowns had a detrimental impact on the development of children. Instead of saying that, the whoopee cushion, she tried to double down. I just don't understand it. I don't get it. No one would have called her out for admitting that she was wrong. Matter of fact, she probably would have gained some people's respect. Everyone is wrong at some point. No one is right 100% of the time. Admitting when you're wrong is a sign of maturity. Maybe the ladies on The View missed that part of their development in high school. But give me your thoughts on this. Dr. Phil embarrasses our favorite beauties. Instead of just admitting they were wrong, Whoopi Goldberg and the unknown panelists, they try to double down on their own personal ideology. And by the way, I checked recent ratings for The View. I was hoping to see a steep decline. Their ratings are actually going up. What the hell's going on here? Who watches this garbage? It ain't me, but let me know. Sound off in the comments below. Like, subscribe, share the video. I appreciate your support. Best way to contact me is by email at btlkc84@gmail.com, KC_BTL84 on Twitter. I'll see you guys tomorrow.